what does a really different thinker look like? And you even use yourself as an example, right? You've been so successful in so many ways, which clearly means you're thinking differently than the average person. Otherwise, you'd still be just an average employee, not a senior leader at some of the top finance companies out there.
It comes from the ability to, one, think very principally, like kind of logic approach, which I know is popular in Silicon Valley, but something that I ascribe to, I think.
Like first principles.
First principles, yeah. And I was taught that actually in private equity, which is like, just think about a business from its first principles, not like all these decisions we're saying, just try to apply logic to them. That sounds so easy and obvious, but you get into all these worlds where people have all kinds of other stuff like, I just did this comp review as an example that I was just arguing with someone about. They were sort of coming up with all these relative ways of how we could look at comp and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, don't we just have peers that we look at? And then what is the comp that they're offering? And do we think that what percentile do we want to be? And then isn't that the answer? But there's this whole thing about, well, when did someone join? And, all these other things that don't really matter and aren't how it should work and aren't logical. And so I think it starts with a first principle thinking. And I also think it then you get into sort of like experience and what you can't have an experience, because if you're somewhat inexperienced, which of course I am in some ways, and I'm experienced in other ways, everyone's like that. It's about pattern matching, right? And trying to apply what works, what you've seen work and how it can apply to what you do today, but not pattern matching the wrong things, which a lot of people do too. So I don't necessarily know if I can identify that blueprint, to be honest.
Fair enough. Speaking of that and related to it, you mentioned briefly kind of your growing up and what that looked like and some of the stuff your dad told you and how to think through things. Walk us through that a little bit. Like, how did you get down the path that you went through overall in life? And once again, you stuck out in ways that put you in the positions you're at, which, to be clear, many of your peers, even, I think you went to Columbia, if I recall, like many of your peers from where you went to school and other things like that, like are not in positions you're in. So what do you think made you different? Is it from your childhood? What did you learn that kept pushing you forward to where you are today?
Yeah, I think that so my dad was a CFO of startups, biotech's sort of the business in Boston. And he was not a sports guy, but I remember in the backyard, we'd have these barbecues for the summer. He would have these barbecues and he'd be able to relate to everybody because he really knew the details of what the business was. And so he knew the intricacies of these people's jobs. And I would watch him and he'd say, how's it going? He was a CFO. So, in AP, you're doing this and that. And he'd be able to relate to them with humor and understanding their job. And I picked that up and I thought, I'm going to kind of do what he did and really get into the details of everything and use that as a way to relate to people, because they're going to know that I understand what they do. And so when I'm managing people that are twice, or sometimes, 3 times my age, I'm going to be able to at least see them where they are in terms of how they're doing their job. And I think I took those details and then was able to kind of zoom out and create a new vision for how things could be, whether it be, with card and expense management, or now with blockchain, the capital markets, and like use the details to kind of change the way things are done and make sure you really understand them. Because one of the powers of fintech is you got to make it work across finance, capital markets, tech, and regulatory, and kind of putting those pieces together. You need the details to make it work. You can't just do whatever you want in financial services because those details matter, but you need to also be able to zoom out by understanding those to see how the world could be different. And I think that is what I've been able to do successfully across, all the companies.
So do you think then, are you sort of saying it's making sure you understand the nuances of each individual as like a person on your team, or at least your senior team, and then also understanding the details of the role? Like, one thing that's still hard to do, right? You have to be, clearly you're very smart, but are there ways you try to do that you can go deep, or is it just working harder than everyone else?
No, it's not just working harder. I think it's being willing to ask the questions and spend the time on the details of the business that other people just wouldn't. Right. I've come across lots of people, and it gets to your point. Everyone thinks they're hardworking. Everyone also thinks they're detail oriented. You're never going to meet someone like, oh no, I'm not in the details. Like, who's going to say that? Maybe 10% of the people. Right. But I think it's like when something doesn't make sense, a lot of people are afraid to ask. I don't have that fear. So I'll say, what are you saying? And then oftentimes they'll realize the person they even know, or it's wrong. And so I think, like, for me, I have enough confidence over the years to know that if I don't really understand or I'm questioning, it's more than likely that there's a problem. And so I kind of follow, like, again, back to kind of following those things that seem off. I really hunt those down and I make sure I understand exactly what's going on. And I don't think everybody does that. And I don't think that's just about hard work. I think it's spending the time up front when you join an organization to really understand what that organization does, get on the sales calls, get into the customer views, speak with the engineers. Why is it architected this way? What are the limitations? Why are we doing this? I think that type of thing is not necessarily what everyone does.